suppressing literature, conquering civilization, teaching falsehood, mixing it with truth. To do what? To confuse the people, and then coming there to remedy them, and establishing institutions saying, oh, we have the remedy, and then teaching them falsehood. That's how and that's why. This is why Yahshua said, in this time when it comes to bring remedy, that he would overthrow and overthrow and overthrow. But how do they trick the people? They trick the people by using the Nazarene, deceiving the people, and saying that he sanctioned these things that they're doing. And the people believe them instead of reading what the prophets said. You see, isn't it simple? Then he also says in the Hebrew text, my people are being destroyed by the day for a lack of knowledge. Did it say lack of faith? Nope. Did it say lack of belief? Nope. Did it say lack of prayer? Nope. Did it say lack of running? Nope. Like eating sandwiches? Nope. Lack of knowledge. But what is propagated by most religionists? They condemn those who seek knowledge as if they're attacking God's realm. Don't they? But what did the script say? The people are being destroyed for lack of knowledge. Also, relative to those who would challenge a study of these things, when they talk to the Nazarene, they talk to the God principles, and they say, well, how are we supposed to recognize God? How are we supposed to, how do we know what's up? And he replied, look first back into the hole from which you were dug. Which means if you don't know your own history, don't sit there talking about no gods. That's in the book. It's a fraud of a fraud. Now, it's called fiat currency. Now, listen, let's look at this.
I guess the question on the same subject. I just wanted to
let's expand on that a little bit. Yeah.
On this.
Could you ever see Drew Ali in that type of predicament that you see other Moors in that particular article?
No, because he wouldn't have done that. Would not have done it. Would not done such things to bring shame on the nation. However, what that constitutes is seeking materialistic and selfish gain and justifying it by someone else's fraud. Our duty is to tell the truth. And our duty also is, under those circumstances, to file a massive suit against U.S. officials for violating United States Republic, constitutional republic policy and law. So you have criminals, because policy is what you call public activity that's harmonious with the organic constitution, which means all things or dictums are not written in the Constitution, but all things that are harmonious with those principles, which are sodomy principles, are the law. And anything contradictory to that is not the law. What you have, and the problem that you have here, is U.S. officials, Union State Society officials, who have guised themselves as legitimate, though they are not. United States Republic, constitutionally delegated with delegation of authority orders, and that would be written as capital D, delegation authority orders any true public official constitutionally delegated responsibilities of issuing any arguments of controversy relative to jurisdictions, courts, tribunals, etc. in the United States Republic would have a certified certificate called a DOAO, and upon command is obligated to present it. The people are not familiar with it because they have not been told that, because they don't know government. And so you have U.S. officials who are fraudulently faking to be delegated officials having authority to govern in the jurisdictions of the United States Republic that they are given what you call constitutional governance rule over by agreement of the Moors and some European sons, delegated United States Republic, guaranteeing to all the states only a Republican form of government. You have subversives who have been here, who have taken over, who have robbed, killed, stolen the seats, bought the seats, torn up votes, and have been misusing unconscious Moors' 3/5 votes under Smith and Johnson that they have been voting under the Voting Rights Act, 14th and 15th Amendments, which are frauds, which were not properly passed and are never part of that Constitution, which why they must be revisited every 25 years by whatever president is presiding and voted on by the citizens whose names they bear. Smith, Jones, Johnson, and all that. Asiatics with European names, which makes them automatically, lawfully, and legally wards of the states, and being the agreement of the states being corporate bodies themselves, have the obligations to take care of the stock affairs of the quote-unquote citizens of their jurisdiction. Being they're not true United States persons, they are a corporate entity that actually exists. And so since you got these Asiatics or proper people of the United States faking themselves, being somebody that they're not, transacting business in somebody else's name, and they've been doing it for quite a few generations, while they know better. And so if a Negro votes, which is a fiction, and he votes in a European's name, which is a secondary fiction, and those 3/5 votes don't go the way the Europeans want to, they can lawfully, legally tear them votes up, put them in a trash can right in front of your face, and you don't have no suit. Which is what they did in Florida. So should they chide Bush? Or should they chide these Asiatics who are faking to being somebody they're not? See, we need to look at this thing honestly. Did he steal those votes? Or did he claim what was his? Huh? Did these Asiatics argue that you're instituting some democracy and the Constitution never gave you that authority? Because this is a Republican form of government and we must be represented. But as Negro, blacks, and colored, they cannot be represented because they're committing a fraud and can be sued. But the Europeans won't sue them because it's easier to make them an economic base because they don't know themselves. So now it's the law. Now, we're not talking emotions.
Is that the same thing that,
is that the same scenario in which you're talking about, like when Trent Lott made the comment that if Thurman elected in 48, that they wouldn't have had all of the problems that they have now, and he was referring to the Negro problem.
It's exactly correct.
Now, if you will respond to this, in 1948, if Thurman was elected, then it would have been overt in terms of the segregationist platform, and the Negro codes and laws that would have been embedded on these people would have been worse.
But they knew that would cause civil unrest and probably a revolution.
So they made it overt.
During the same time in the 40, I think it's 46 and 48, that you dealt with the issue with Bilbo and the rest of them talking about taking some of these Asiatics and shipping them. And but no nations would accept us. Because truthfully, we didn't come from nowhere. So they have a problem. They got to catch 22. So then they had to increase investment in the penal industry to build jails because they can't send us nowhere.
So what they did was they made a covert operation that was overt in 48.
Exactly correct.
And today it's covert, and you got many different facets you can call it. You can call it traffic court. You can call it the jump out laws, and in Delaware, they jump out on you?
It is politically, as far as from a corrupt point of view, it is politically, cleverly beautiful. Now, Key, let's deal with this, Brother Raheem. So I want to compliment you and give you our respect and appreciation for teaching every Wednesday to bring these people into consciousness because they need it out here. That's an aside. Thank you. Congratulations on your son. The Constitution establishes in the territories under the jurisdiction of the United States Republic and its Republican form of government, criminal courts and civil courts, and courts of consular nature. Now, a civil case cannot be tried in a criminal court. Not lawfully. A criminal act cannot be tried in a civil court. Not lawfully. These are checks and balances that are built in. Where did traffic court come from? Find it in the Constitution. Doesn't exist. How do they justify it? They list it How do they justify it? They list traffic court under criminal court. Now, if traffic and movement is a crime, then every offense would be timed. Because when you deal with civil matters, you deal with fines, mainly. We deal with crime, you deal with time. So how can traffic court be listed under criminal matters and you don't get indictment papers? Because due process requires that if you commit a crime, you must have will and intent and act upon it and create or commit a crime against society and be taken out of society with all your civil liberties being removed, becoming civiliter mortuus, civilly dead. And that does not deal with fines. It deals with time, removal of liberties, property, etc. So there is no clause, no article in the Constitution that establishes a traffic court. Now, upon examination of matters dealing with traffic or travel on the land is the people's right and not a privilege. But traffic, driving matters, etc., deals with licenses under privileges and under raising of revenues, which is relative to taxation, which is making a right a privilege, and then selling it back under force of a contract and calling it law, then fining the people without time, without an indictment, without a jury of their peers, and commanding substance, or what they're calling money, over $20, which Constitution states that anything over $20, a trial is demanded and required. Looks like a criminal act to me. How about you? Of course it is. Now, so if someone knows that and knows the Constitution, they know that if they have tickets and etc., they have an argument before the courts because they know it's a fraud. Now, you know that because you understand the law. Just to say those things without explaining it is not doing anyone any good because they don't know law. Now, any other rights that they want to debate, they revert back to you. But they're your birthrights.
Don't you give up those rights when you claim residency in any of the corporate jurisdictions?
Did you claim it, or did they claim it and put it on you? That sounds like a linear contract to me, and can be disputed, can't it?
It's another fraud of a fraud.
Oh, of course you know that. But if you understand the truth about your nationality and your birthright, you would recognize when they're doing that and would not allow them to create that jurisdiction, would you? Because aren't there three issues before any lawful tribunal and particularly the Republican form of government, and that is, before there's any adjudication in any matters, whether it's a person or a matter or an issue, the first issue before the court, the tribunal, would be the status of the persons, individual parties. Am I correct? Which would go with identification of them, right? Whether or not they are party to a contract that's in controversy and a violation of some article in that contract or agreement that constitutes a violation of that contract, which would be the law, all introduced into evidence. And then indictment papers would be presented to the defense so that you could prepare a defense, because if you're being accused, you have a right to all information under a writ in the nature of discovery that you can have, that so you can prepare a defense. Am I correct? And with a jury of your own peers, so you can't have no foreign person sitting up there judging you. So then we're going back to status, so therefore nationality must be established. Am I correct? And America is not a nationality, is it? American is not a nationality, is it? It's a geographical location, isn't it? But we're Moorish Americans, aren't we? There's the pedigree, and you're tied to the land. Who's the sovereign? Oh. Now, so if somebody comes talking about, well, we are all Americans, are we talking about the United States of Brazil? Are you talking about the United States of Mexico? Oh, the United States of Haiti? You see how subtle that is? And if you don't know these fundamentals, how you can get trapped? If you don't know the quote-unquote, big quote, truth about your nationality? Truth about is important. Let's take nationality and birthrights and put them aside for a moment. Come all ye Asiatics of North America. Break this down and hear the truth about your nationality and your birthrights. You are not Negro, black, colored, Ethiopian. Learn of your ancient mothers and fathers' ancient divine creed. Come and link yourselves back with the families of nations. That's a political statement. I don't know whoever made that into anything else.
Todd, just based on that, linking yourself back to the families of nations, knowing the temple structures throughout the country,
set up like government,
and in terms of the square footage, and you being a master builder, you know, like the temple structures in Philadelphia alone probably don't add up no more than maybe 2,500 square feet, maybe 3,000 out of the 4 or 5 temples that are in the city of Philadelphia. That capacity being known, then you're looking at the numbers of people that could attend these buildings, these temple buildings. Now, so you're looking at maybe 300 people. How many dead, uncivilized people live in this
Let me
Philadelphia?
clarify.
So my point is, when you link yourself back to the families of nations, this is not something that's necessarily going to be done in a building. Because we don't even have no building that holds.
And it's not even that.
Because that was the mindset of many. Like, you got to go to the temple to have this.
Now, what are you really addressing, Brother Raheem? What you're addressing, wisely so, and qualifiedly so, is what is our concept of what government is. Those who understand government know that government is not a building. Those who understand civilization know that society is not a building. That the nation is not people who belong to an institution. The nation is out here. The true courtroom is in the society itself. Every time you do trade or commerce or communicate in any institution, you're in the court. Government is an abstract. What qualifies government is principles. National principles. They are not beliefs, for they are written and stated in the Constitution.
So Todd, if you was down here at Unity Day and had the opportunity to speak before thousands, and everybody said, "Hooray, we want to go to the Moorish Science
There's
Temple,"
nowhere to go.
You can't.
Because the Moorish Science Temple is a frame of mind if it's really properly understood. This is why Jwali said to the Moors who came into the temple, what is the power of the temple? What is the power of the institution of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science? The power of the institution of the Moorish Science Temple of America and the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, the Old Canaanite Temple, the Great Seal, etc., the Moorish Divine National Movement of the world, all of those coming under the umbrella of the Moorish Divine National Movement, are not to be viewed as individual powers unto themselves superior to the others. But it's important to pay attention to what Noble Jwali said. He called on all loyal Moors. One group of people. Second group of people. All members. That's referred to members in the temples. Third group of people. All qualified, true American citizens. Those are three different bodies of people that Noble Jwali addressed. The first being all loyal Moors, and that's qualified, isn't it? All loyal Moors. What is he appealing to? People who are loyal to those ancient autonomy principles of their ancient mothers and fathers. Not just because they're Moors. Then he appealed to the second group of Moors, not the first, second group in his column, all members, which implies members of those temples, etc. Then the third group of people, all true, qualification again, American citizens, who are for the enforcement of a free national government, Constitution.
So it's bigger than what people think it is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, because I mean, the narrow mind is like the temple building. This is where you go. You must be here on Wednesday,
Now,
Friday.
that's the
Sunday.
danger. That's the danger of the divisions that you often see from people who came into this movement with treacherous and traitorous intent to distort the mission. Now, I want to remind you again that Noble Jwali said, I want all the citizens, true citizens, and he said this clearly, of the United States of America, to help me in my mission to bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government, that they might learn to love instead of hate, and receive their divine rights as citizens according to our Constitution, which was prepared for all free national beings, that the lion and lamb might lay down together, and when the morning comes, neither one be harmed. Now, how somebody sit up there and start fooling these people and talking about he was just teaching some kind of religious aspect is beyond truth. I'll not call them liars. I'll just say, examine what the prophet said. And he said, there is but one supreme issue, and that is the foresaid, what I had just said. One supreme issue doesn't mean that he didn't deal with other subject matter. He did.
There was a supreme, which
but
is
that
the
was
national
the supreme issue. Therefore, that is the supreme issue of this Moorish movement, is to bring these people who have been outside of the constitutional fold of government back into the constitutional fold of government. Now, let's put this like it is. If these people are not taught the principles of constitutional law, the essence of it, the nature of it, which is a covenant, which is an agreement, which is a contract, that has written document articles And they're not familiar with it. They're not familiar with the nature of it, the structure of it, the reason for it, the history behind it, their connection to it. They will disconnect mentally because they think this is the instrument that suppressed them. Do you understand? Because they're associated with the European sons only who have been abusing them and holding them outside the constitutional fold of government artificially. But they didn't know that part of the tools that was used by them themselves accepting Negro, black, colored, Smith, Jones, and Johnson, which took them outside of the constitutional fold of government, which caused them to be trying to force their uncivilized position on a civilized world.
And as a result, their deeds brought Jim
The
Crow.
consequence.
Yeah, Jim Crowism, segregation, and everything.
It's called cause and effect. Also deals with law of compensation. Am I correct? All right. Now, so the deal is, so traffic court and the black codes of 1724, which is Christian black codes that came from the church, introduced into the states. They closed the Freedmen's Bureau, which was established in 1866. Actually initiated in 1865, but established in 1866, closed in 1870, which was to do what? To repatriate these Asiatics, recolonize them back onto the land between the Rocky Mountains and the Alleghenies. Am I correct? We deal with the 3630 parallel issues. Also the same issues that was brought up in the Dred Scott case. What did they do? They squandered the finance and closed it in 1870. 1866, 67, 68, 69, 70. 5 years. And they closed the Freedmen's Bureau. Now, let's look in history. What other institution is relative to the work of the Freedmen's Bureau with other things added to it? Old Canaanite Temple, or the Moorish Divine and National Movement, which you see today, established by Noble Drew Ali to redeem the people from their sinful ways. What is their sinful ways? Practicing those things that delude to slavery, which are outside of the constitutional fold of government, which causes them to be black, legally. Now let's look in the law dictionary, colored, which you didn't get a chance to finish. Now let's stay with this. Let us stay with this concept, because we're going to deal with this, because this also gives Moors and anyone who understands this a defense when they go into traffic court. And these are the principles I used when I was POW. Now read colored.
Okay, I'm going to read colored out of the unabridged dictionary first.
Yes.
Right? And it says, having a color, dyed, tinged, painted, or stained. Having a specious or plausible appearance as a colored statement. Having dark or black color of the skin. Belonging wholly or in part to the African race. Having the color of the Negro, black or mulatto as a colored citizen, colored children, having a distinguishing hue as a colored ribbon, embodying having any color except green as colored foliage. Where? Yeah, I'm reading it right here, though.
Etymology. The brackets. Always go to brackets.
Oh, I looked at that color. That's color here. I'm sorry. Okay, Latin. No, that's it. There's no brackets on this one right here. There's no brackets on that color. Colored. Or color. Here's color. And color. And okay.
Excuse me.
Old Latin, elos, color, original sense, a covering from celare, to cover, to hide.
Mm-hmm. Now, now back to the point, what you were saying earlier, sister, about hiding. You're not colored people because what are you doing? You're praying to sanction the hiding of your own history and culture. So you understand when Drew Ali is saying these things, he's talking spiritually, not just civically. And you must study to recognize that he's going beyond the gates And if you don't study, you won't recognize it. Now, also read Color from Law Book.
Okay, color from the law book is an appearance, semblance, or simulacrum as distinguished from that which is real.
Oh, so colored people are not real, are they? They're artificial. So can you, having a charge in jurisdiction of jurisprudence or that science which treats positive law, bring someone to a court established by free national beings and adjudicate an issue with an artificial person, which is technically a corporation itself, which is an it and not a being. And if they agree that that is what they are outside of law and come under color of law and color of authority agreeably, which makes it legal, which makes it lawful.
Color of law, the appearance or semblance.
Now, back to the issue of establishing status when you come into a courtroom, why it's important. Because if you allow them to take jurisdiction in an assumption that you are colored and you don't challenge it, or that you're black, having no rights, and you don't challenge it, then that court assumes jurisdiction, bypasses both the issue of status, which is the first issue that they're obligated to establish, meaning identify the parties, am I correct?
Right.
Who they are, identify and present their certified authority to deal with, quote unquote, the law, issues of jurisdiction. You know what the Supreme Court says about if a challenge, if the jurisdiction of a court is challenged, they must produce in written form their authority or jurisdiction, which constitutes the delegation of authority order, right? Then they would bypass jurisdiction / venue, which means they would put you in a fraudulent jurisdiction, a corporate jurisdiction, not dealing with natural persons, but dealing with corporate entities, which means a corporation cannot speak for itself, can it? However, this being who claims to be someone who's not is claimed to be Whoopi Goldberg, Smith, Jones, Johnson, Osbaldor, Frederick, or somebody. And therefore, there is some, that pedigree can be traced. Therefore, there are some people who have vested in the states their earthly goods and their rights to possession, including their pedigree name. And so if somebody's transacting business in their name, they have a right to anything that person bought.
So the issue is you don't go past status.
Exactly. But if you don't identify yourself, if you don't declare your nationality, that is waived automatically. It's called assumed jurisdiction or waiver.
Because
But you didn't object, and they called you Negro, Black, or Colored, Smith, Jones, and Johnson. You didn't object. It's waived. And so they go right on to jurisdiction and venue.
So
now,
the only way you can go past status is that everybody at the table are Moorish nationals.
no. The only way you go past status is if the defendant, plaintiff can do it too, but if the defendant, because usually the position of a defendant, does not object or does not present himself, herself, in proper person. That's why it says before court, if one makes a plea even with an attorney or a lawyer, etc., jurisdiction is already assumed, as the person is automatically assumed to have given leave. That's the issue of impropria persona versus pro se. That's in your law book. Which is why Moors who really understand their rights don't hire lawyers, because he's an officer of the court. Now let's look. Now let's go through this real quick, and then don't let me get too far away, because I don't want to lose point. Judge, magistrate who claims to be the referee, claims to be. Ain't showed you no papers yet. Technically, you're just corporate clerk. Member of the Bar Association of England, which is a branch here in the Americas, etc. Officer of the court. We got that? Prosecutor. Member of the Bar Association of England, with a branch here in the Americas, etc. Officer of the court. We got that. The private corporation bar association that the judge is using the public funds and that bench to solicit sales for and propagate across that bench saying that they supersede the Constitution and they due process and that you need to pay him so that you can have some rights. Member of the Bar Association of England with a branch here in the Americas and an officer of the court. You ever hear the term conflict of interest? Oh, doesn't that clearly exist? Does it take a rocket scientist to recognize that? Then if Moors know about their birthrights and they go hire a lawyer, they already know he's an officer of the court, therefore he's a spy. Pardon me, a paid spy. And his first obligation is to the court, not to you. So if you don't know your rights, you don't have them. And when you give him power of attorney, you just declared for the record, factually, that you are incompetent. And being that he's an officer of the court, his first obligation is to raise finance for the court. So the judge sells the Bar Association, for, of course, the court, superseding the Constitution and your due process, and he's a partner with him. They probably both go to the golf club together, running with each other's sisters and doing all the rest of the stuff, and with the preacher's wife, and he's the partner with all them, and they've been sucking off of you. That's the theft of your birthright. And these are supposed to be what public servants, and now you're serving them and ain't figured it out.
Is that like the doctors in the pharmaceutical industry?
Same thing. Conflict of interest. You know, of course, they ain't going to tell you about herbs. And they're going to condemn herbs. It's the same thing. And so when you really understand this and you understand traffic court, now if someone is brought to traffic tribunal, traffic court, which deals with commercial vehicles. Now, you must understand also that what they call driving laws, etc., deals with commercial entities and transportation of goods across state lines and within state territories under what you call privileged, license issues, revenue-raising jurisdictions, having nothing to do with the common people's right to travel the land in their personal conveyances, which require no licenses, no fees of any type. Do you understand that? Understanding that, you already know that those codes have been placed on the common people unlawfully by corrupt politicians.
Hey, Taj, on that same vein, in the city of Philadelphia, I received many tickets over the last year or so, parking violation tickets, as they say, and I've been returning them sender, and putting on there no contract, no consent, private property, and sending it back. I haven't received not one bill in the mail, and I may have sent about maybe 6 or 7 of them.
But the other thing that you would do, and it's what you recognize with most people, is tell them that a complaint or ticket is a complaint. It's not an indictment. And it constitutes nothing as far as legal movement, and it's a non-prosecutable document. That's number one. It's an artifice. So, secondly, like you say, you don't agree to the contract, and you don't want to do no business with them.
And I guess my point is, I didn't receive any correspondence back. I mean, I guess they purged it. But usually, what happens is, you will get something in the mail from them, a fine.
Or they come after you.
Yeah.
Things like that, But it's sort of like that's a precursor of understanding your right.
And see, I assume,
the way that you presented it.
Right, because what I'm assuming
doesn't mean that they're not going to harass you.
Right, but what I'm assuming is that they have those within that corporate structure that knows the law, and when they come across that type of response to their
putting up a challenge to protect their birthright, what normal procedures would be to immediately assume jurisdiction and proceed to use color of law and the call of authority and fraudulent warrants and go after your liberty, your property. Now, the real deal is understanding those things, and because what has happened is many Moors, particularly Great Seal Moors, have instituted suits against them, and have put lien against some of them, and which has caused to give them pause.
Well, you said liberty and property, but we know they're even becoming more extreme. They're really going after your life.
Well, of course you know that, because that's your movement. See, it's like water. You go to a stream, and the water's flowing freely and moving with the tides, moving with the moon, and it represents life. And you can catch fish from it and feel safe. You go to a stagnant pool, and you don't want to eat the catfish and all the other fish because you might get disease. Because stagnation means stopping movement, which means stopping the current movement. fiat currency, not money, currency. So when you understand they're dealing with electricity and what you call movement, magnetism, male and female principles in nature, which is why they're called currency, back to gold and silver, why they could get it out of your hands. All this is relative. They're scientifically suppressing us. We need to understand that. Not emotionally, not just because they're nice being wrong guys, not being fair. They're actually using science. And so the deal is, with Moors need to learn the truth about their nationality and birthright and understand the scientific methods of psychic attacks that are actually being used against us so that we can reverse the polarity. Because what they're doing, they're using nature attacks on us.
Are those, when you say science, I understand it was the 5 points of science, or the 5 senses that we taught them.
Yes, but let's look at this. Let's look at this more in more detail. Me and Brother Abdullah was talking about this earlier this morning. You ever see him take the Moorish star? Let me see if someone erased for this. Can I erase him for this? I want to show you some symbolisms. And so we're going to get out of spookyisms and go into some real symbolisms and understand what these things actually mean in society. Even a rag will do. Where? Oh, I see it. Here it is. I see it. All right. Now, you know how, like, you see the Moorish star, 5 points? You know what they represent, but you also know what reverse polarity is. All right, so you deal with the Moorish star with it pointed down, and then they put the head of a jackal on it, and then they call it and then sometimes they put the horns of the goat, and then sometimes they put the head of the jackal. Yeah. Now let's talk about when you're dealing with the principles or the divine principles, or you're talking about polarity. In polarity, in the book of Revealing, it would be talking about separating the wheat from the chaff, the sheep from the goat. These are principles. Or in Real Deal, they'll show you in symbolism, often when they're telling stories, or in certain novels, they use the head of a jackal in that star inverted. And what it represents is the lower nature of man personified and activated in society in reverse of the upright principles. But it's the same, but it's really the truth reversed. And the jackal, if you study the jackal, what you'll find is a jackal on the border of Asia and Europe. And the jackal has silver hair, black hair, blonde hair, brown hair, all in the same patches in the body. And the unique thing about that jackal is that jackal does not just kill to eat. What that jackal does, it kills, buries its prey, does not come back to get it until it begins to rot. Then it comes back, digs it up when it's rotting, and that way, in its digestive system, it receives the nourishment. Means it is a destroyer of the destroyed. So it's the nature of it, which is why that symbol is used. And so, when you're talking about the Satan, you're actually talking about the lowest nature of man. So we're Lucifer, Satan, devil, dragon, and beast, and it's not some alien being. It really just symbols the animal nature, the lower animal nature of man himself. 2 legs and 2 arms, not some spook. And when you understand the use of that symbol, that's what it's really for. And it is the Moorish star, reversed. And so it's actually also representative of all the 5 senses being used for the lower nature. That's why the point is down. Also, when you look at the Moorish flag displayed amongst Moorish Americans, so like when you see the prophets talking to the Moors, he'd have the flag with the star inverted just like this. Because we're in our lower nature also, because the nation at this time, though rising, is fallen. Or it's in distress. When we're back. When we're back. Yes, it's just like the nation in distress. No different when nation's in distress or one of the prominent people veils or some tragic thing occurs and you put the flag at half mast and put it upside down. You know, so you must understand how those things in what you call national standards are used so you don't get confused or read into things that are not there also. Or not do things thinking that you're doing right when you really don't understand or not acknowledging the stats. Because Moors are not taking their place among the affairs of men yet. We're trying to get them there, according to the instructions of the prophet. They're not there yet. We're doing today work that was supposed to be done 3 or 4 generations ago amongst the Moorish Americans, but the traitors intervened with their great sellout. And so they stagnated the movement by trying to own the institutions that the prophet had set up in order to own the prophet's literature, in order to stop his literature and information from getting out to the people, which is why even today you can go out to many people and you can talk about all these so-called black leaders and they're familiar. You talk about Noble Drew Ali and everybody's brain gets smoked. Right. But that's Moore's fault. There's thousands of Moors here are conscious, but they followed the traitors' position of stopping the PR. This is the reason why when you start doing the research on the FBI papers and you start seeing all the context that the FBI, CIA men had with Moorish leaders within the movement when the great sellout was taking place. That's why you see a lot of Moors won't expose them papers to the Moors to let them know that some of the people that was dirty Moors are around.
So what's the purpose of the vanguard?
That Drew Ali talked about? Talk about the vanguard is people, be honest with you, like yourself, that have the guts and the courage to come out here and go get the people in spite of the opposition from within and without, and start guiding the people aright. That's the vanguard. That's exactly who the vanguard is, and no one else. And the vanguard are few. Why? Because most people won't acknowledge the opposition that's within the movement. Because they want to say that everybody got turban and feathers on is for this movement. Well, they're not. Never have been. Many of them are in this movement to stagnate the movement, and that's their mission. That's why they were inserted. Some come on their own, and some are paid-off agents, which is why the public don't know about this movement, while the public have thought to the day as a general rule that is a religious movement and not a national civic movement. Well, Drew Ali, in order to try to save this movement because of the internal corruption, you go into his literature, and they'll tell you, during the time when the Moorish Holy Temple of Science adopted as its corporate name, that's qualification. Go check the records. The Moorish Holy Temple of Science, sovereign institution, adopted as its corporate name, the Moorish Science Temple of America, and registered as a civic organization. That means science of government.
What's the correct name again? Moorish?
Holy Temple of Science. Adopted as his corporate name, and I think he had about 11 months to live after that. In other words, the Moorish Science Temple only existed about 11 months during the span of Noble Drew Ali's life. Prior to that, it was the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, and all the rules and usages, culture, everything was established under the Moorish Holy Temple of Science. Moorish Science Temple was adopted by the Holy Temple of Science as a corporate name. Corporate activity, meaning that the Moorish Holy Temple of Science did not disappear, nor did its jurisdiction, but that there's rules and regulations that apply to both the Moorish Holy Temple of Science and the Moorish Science Temple of America at the same time, as two relative but separate entities, one dealing with corporate issues, and it's dealing with people who are dealing with religious affidavits and people who didn't understand truth about nationality and birthright, who could also use religion, you know what I'm saying, as a basis for tax exempt, et cetera, something like that. And then those who knew their birthright, who were understood, those who were expert, which would be called adepts, who understood the truth, could stand up for it by law. In other words, he made a place for everybody. However, people looking at this movement, by not studying, are unaware of that, and just look at this movement as being the Moorish Science Temple only, don't recognize the Moorish Divine National Movement, don't recognize the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, don't recognize the Old Canaanite Temple or the Great Seal, not knowing that they're all part of the same movement. Different degrees of understanding, different degrees of knowledge, and different degrees of activity. And the vanguard are those who are taking this to the people. Those who are not the vanguard are those who've been sitting on it, or others who've been going to the grave with this knowledge. We're letting the people suffer, and which is why you're at the Pearl of Africa now, and people like yourself and myself, while we're here. And I tell you this, and it's not a pat on our backs, it has nothing to do with that. If it wasn't for people like us, Jewali wouldn't be back on the burner again. Because it was up to those who were in control of the movement, most of you wouldn't be sitting here. I guarantee you that, almost. And these issues and the level of information and knowledge that the people are dealing with today would not be out there. Because by design and by conspiracy, it was being depressed, oppressed, suppressed, hidden, expunged. And the national side of the Moorish movement was dead. It was black. And so what happened was people was coming to our temples, which is still our institution, and all they was doing was reverse church. And of course that's the truth, and of course most people won't admit that because of our egos. But that's still the truth. And when it came to protecting their birthright, you see Moors in nigger lines going through all the suffering, that this nationality and birthright issue was to remove this suffering from them. Didn't even know the value of their nationality card, didn't even know that it had to deal with their status in this covenant contract. That when that crescent and star was seen and that Moorish flag, you know what I'm saying, and our amity banner, amity and commerce banner was seen, that immediately the jurisdiction issue changed, the venue changed whenever the European dealt with us.
So even with the name or the title deal today,
They supposed to automatically recognize that the venue changed.
But the people still continued to contribute to those things that brought disgrace, dishonor, disrespect,
Why?
and
Because
everything.
Moors themselves that were wearing turbans and fezzes was going around lying to the people saying that this was a religious movement. And were busy practicing religion without definition and still practicing divisions even amongst themselves and talking about bringing these people in the constitutional fold of government. How? Most of them ain't never read a constitution. And yet Drew Ali said, help me bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government. I want all sincere people to help me in my mission, in this great missionary work.
And you know, it's ironic that you bring that up, because even in the Sacred Drift, the book that was written about Noble Drew Ali, and the trial that took place in the 1930, roughly 19. When was that when the officers got killed? In that was 1930.
No.
1930, right after Drew Ali.
28, 29. Some of them got killed before, and they tried what they did. Now Green, who was the secretary.
But the point,
Yeah, but let's because we got to lead up to that, because without qualification, it would just cause distortion. Green was the secretary for Noble Drew Ali, Treasury Secretary, etc. Now, he worked for a Yiddish man called the Jew. You know, a lot of these Moors are trying to sell the movement out to those Yiddish who were claiming to be Jews and not Jews. Because you know we're Jews. You know that. We just don't use it because he's using it. That's our degree. There were controversies there. Money was disappearing. Ali took a trip to Chicago. Come back, his furniture's out in the street. Money's missing. They was trying to steal. There was millions and millions and millions, compound millions of dollars in the Moorish movement. And Drew Ali was building this for the people. They were trying to squander the money. And he said, this belongs to the people. You will not squander this. They did everything they could to get him out of his own movement. Not some foreigners, people with turbans and feathers in this movement. Drew Ali wrote a letter from prison, and he addressed it to the few, I'm qualifying this, few, you know what few means? Few faithful Moors. Few faithful Moors. Few faithful Moors to help him. And warn the Moors of the traitors within this movement that were trying to take over the movement and displace him.
Because of his fame and nobility.
Yes, but you got to understand, see, because the world recognized him. Because he was the first true, legitimate representative of the Moorish nation in a couple hundred years to stand up to represent these people in their proper person, which is why he was recognized by the Queen of England, etc. And they didn't give him that noble title, as some people say. That noble title was acknowledged that he is who we say he is, give him what he wants.
And so you laid the foundation well. So around 1930, when Brother Al-Ail was going to court.
Yes, after that shootout.
Yeah, just to back up what you were saying, in that very book, The Sacred Drift, the author made a reference in saying that the Moors who flocked to the courtrooms, they were jam-packed in the courtroom with turbans and feathers on, knew as much about jurisprudence as, I can't remember the quote that he used.
And jurisprudence is true law.
Yeah, they did, but he was saying that they knew as much about jurisprudence as, say, a child just coming out of the womb.
Well,
in other words, they were illiterate in terms of law and jurisprudence.
Truth of the matter is Adams did. Adams knew the law because he taught the law. Drew Ali established around himself chosen persons to whom he taught the law. They were held to charge of teaching it to the others. No different than Jesus did, Yahshua did with his disciples. Exactly the same thing. However, we all know that some people reneged. Some people was in it for this, pretending that they were for the cause, which is why they conspired to get rid of him. And when they brought him out of jail, because what they did, they threw his furniture on the street and everything, and he was robbing them finance and everything, and they killed Green and tried to pin it on Drew Ali to get him out. They arrested him on it, tried to chump up them charges, character assassination, the whole thing. Of course they couldn't stick. You understand what I'm saying? But what they did, they arrested him, and they beat him up, and then they got the support of all the Christian ministers in the community who was against him anyway, because he was teaching about the 14th Amendment and the fact that they were Masons, and they was mad at that because people don't know that they Masons. The whole game, people in the temple, you understand, came there acting friendly, most of them which was ministers, so-called converted, who really came in there because many of them were plants to subvert the national side of this movement. Of course, nobody's supposed to talk about that. Many of them still in this movement. You understand what I'm saying? To kill the civic side of this movement so people can think it's just another black religious Islamic sect. You get? That was their mission, to establish that fake reality, not reality, but that fake appearance of reality, that semblance, that color to the people, which is the color that most people have of the Moorish movement now, and anyone says that's not true is a liar.